Hi, I'm Thann Bennett. Thank you for listening to The Equipped. Faith Radio podcasts are only possible because of your support. Thank you for giving and for sharing with a friend. U.S. aid to Ukraine is paused, tariffs take effect, and a joint session of the United States Congress. Hey everyone, I'm Thann Bennett. Welcome into The Equipped. Those are our leading headline stories of the week, and we will turn our attention to those in just a moment. But when we do, as we always do, we will view them through the lens of the true and the beautiful. If this is your first time into this conversation, welcome, and I invite you to go over to theequippednewsletter.com and add your email address to be a part of the community. We do this every week. We come together to discuss headline news, but we do it through the lens of the true and the beautiful, so you will find supportive information at theequippednewsletter.com. Invite you to check it out. When we get to the end of our broadcast today, we're going to talk about a mother's love and the special beauty that exists in a mother's love. There are some specific examples in our family's life in this season, and I want to invite you to explore those moments in your life as well. But we are going to start, as we always do, by standing on truth. And this week, I want to invite you into a question. There is both great trouble and great hope ahead. And I want you to consider how the phrase "on that day" means that you should choose to walk confidently in hope. That is right now on the True. On that day. Just 3 words, but they are 3 words that change everything within the context of the story that we're going to discuss this week on The True. They are 3 words in Zephaniah 3 that denote a dramatic change in both perspective and destiny. And they provide a window today in your life for why and how you should have hope about your future no matter the consequences. They are words that appear several times in Zephaniah, but I specifically want to talk about their appearance in Zephaniah 3:16. This is just a verse before, probably a verse that's very familiar to many of you. Zephaniah 3:17 talks about a God who takes great delight in you and rejoices over you with singing. This is a verse that Brooke and I, my wife Brooke and I, have used with our children, how God, the God of the universe, sings over us. He takes such great delight in us, despite our shortcomings, that he sings over us. That's Zephaniah 3:17. So just a verse before, we find the words "on that day." And really, the entire second half of Zephaniah 3, it's the last chapter of the book. The last half of that chapter is bursting with hope and with exuberation. It talks about a people who will sing and shout. It talks about a people that will be honored. And it talks about a people whose fortunes will be restored. It is entirely optimistic, except for one thing. It's all future tense. None of it has been realized yet. It is all promised, but none of it has yet arrived or been realized. It has been promised on that day. And the flip side of that, the context in which that promise is issued, is the first 2.5 chapters of Zephaniah. And to be honest with you, they're difficult to get through. They are depressing. They are as bleak as the closing passage is optimistic. They speak of judgment and of curses and of destruction. And as much as you might hope that all of these are things of the past, this portion too, those 2.5 chapters, are also future tense. God speaks through the prophet Zephaniah in the same way, using the same words. In fact, 3 times it uses the same words, on that day. So for 2.5 chapters, God is speaking to the prophet that on that day there will be destruction and curses and devastation. And it is only in the second half of Zephaniah 3 that he uses on that day to proclaim great hope and vindication. And my friend, there's really just no use sugarcoating it. There is both great trouble and great vindication, great hope ahead of you. And so the question for you today is not which one of those you will have. You will have both, but it is, why should you stand in confident hope? And you should do it, my friend. I want you to really underscore this. You should do it because the final verdict on that day has already been rendered in your favor. The order of these events, the order of the proclamations in Zephaniah, it matters decisively and conclusively. Yes, there is conflict ahead of you. Yes, there is trouble still to come. There's no use denying it. It is promised. It will come. But those things are not dispositive in your life. Those things are not the end. The final verdict in your life, the one that follows the chaos and in fact subdues the chaos, that is the one that says, on that day, he will take great delight in you. He will rejoice over you with singing. He will rescue you. He will gather you. He will bring you home. Those are all direct quotes from the second part, the latter half of Zephaniah 3. And so, my friend, this week, your hope is not a naive one. You know and understand that there are very real challenges in our world. In fact, we wrestle with them across differences in our community every day or every week on this broadcast. You are not blissfully ignorant. You are well aware of the challenges in our world and the fact that there is adversity ahead. But you also know and understand the order of events that God has promised. You know who gets the final say after all else is said and done. And most importantly, my friend, your identity is found within that one who will have that final say. And that one who has the final say will on that day declare, "You are mine." The order of the promised events of our world matters so much. Yes, there is trouble, there is adversity ahead, but your God, on that day, will declare that you are His and all will be made right. At the end of the day, God wins. And if your identity is found in Him, your eternity is secure. Let's stand on that truth as we turn our attention now to headline news. The leading headline story of the week is one that will evoke great opinion. And I will give you some of my opinion, really not to try to convince you of my opinion, but in order to lay the groundwork for us to lay those opinions down and look through the lens of Scripture to observe the evidence and the facts as they are, and then discern our role in them. I'm not trying to convince you of my opinion. I want to disclose it, though, so that we can wrestle with this difficult task of choosing to apply a biblical lens to our opinions. That leading story of the week is the fact that aid from the United States to Ukraine has been paused. Military aid to aid Ukraine in their effort in the war with Russia, it has been paused, and the reason given for that pause is to speed peace talks between Russia and Ukraine. Now, the move that was instructed by President Donald Trump came just a few days after a very tense Oval Office meeting that probably many of you have heard about, maybe even seen clips. The U.S. President Donald Trump and the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky had very tense words with each other. Vice President J.D. Vance was in the room as well and participated in the conversation. The meeting at the White House was originally intended to include a signing of a deal that would provide security to Ukraine and provide access to the United States to Ukraine's robust rare mineral supply. Ukraine is very rich in critical minerals, and the deal was to help the United States gain access to those minerals as payback for much of the military aid that they have sent Ukraine's way. But the deal did not get signed. The leaders left frustrated with each other. Later on, both Trump and Zelensky did state that the deal is still viable and that they hoped that it would be executed. But the pause on military aid from the United States to Ukraine, it's a significant challenge for the Ukrainian military as they remain under siege from Russia and trying to repel the advance of Russian troops. And so As we zoom back now and consider how we as Jesus followers should interact with this story, I'm going to disclose up front some of my opinion on this story. Even this does not fit neatly within a political narrative, but I think it's important for you to understand where I'm coming from. And there are two things that maybe don't seem to go together, but number one, I am incredibly concerned about the repeated history of Vladimir Putin invading sovereign territory for the purpose of land gain. And I am very worried that if this war ends in a fashion that allows him to take land that is not sovereign Russian territory, he will simply invade again, and I feel that way because he has done it in the past. At the same time, I am very concerned about the United States over-policing the world in a way that cannot be sustained. I don't think that's good for the United States or the world. And those two personal opinions of mine, I share them not to try to convince you of them, but because they color the way I look at a story like this. And I actually have to proactively lay them aside to then turn to Scripture and try to apply a biblical lens, which is what we try to do every week here at the Equipped. And so as we do that, I just want to disclose that that is sort of my personal bias in this story. And I think there has been a tremendous amount of coverage provided to that Oval Office meeting between Trump and Zelensky. And I don't think there's a whole lot of utility in us furthering that conversation. Probably a lot of opinion around that as well. Probably wasn't great for either country. But I don't think that's where we should apply our attention this week. I think we should apply our attention to really intentionally applying a biblical lens to this ongoing war and how we as Jesus followers should engage them. And one of the things that I do think we need to do, even when we land on different opinions, is make sure that we are standing on truth and fact. And I think all sides this week have advanced narratives that are simply not rooted in evidence. And so in this week's pages of the newsletter, which you can find at theequippednewsletter.com, I have laid out 3 pieces of evidence that I believe are rooted in fact. And if you are inclined to agree with one of the political narratives being advanced, one or more of these is going to disrupt your feeling. And so I just want to acknowledge as I go through these that these are uncomfortable places for many of us who come to these stories with personal biases, as I just gave you mine. The first fact is that Russia is the clear aggressor and oppressor in this ongoing war. I don't think this is disputable. In February of 2022, Russian President Vladimir Putin ordered his troops to invade sovereign Ukrainian territory. And the war that has unfolded in the 3 years to follow has cost great human life. It has caused great suffering. And Vladimir Putin is seeking to take land from Ukraine. Russia is the clear aggressor and oppressor in the ongoing war. I also think it's fact that if land is ceded to him, he will absolutely invade again. He has shown that repeatedly over the course of history, most recently in Crimea. Number 2, peace is a worthy goal, and perpetual war should be avoided, especially for us as Jesus followers. And this might seem to be in conflict with point number 1, but I think it's a biblical fact. We as the Equipped family are called to persistently pursue peace. We find it in Psalm 34:14 and other places as well. And this mindset is at odds with the world around us many, many times. And true peace is difficult to achieve. It requires that we are deliberately deciding to pursue it. It also requires a clear understanding of who the oppressor is and who is being oppressed, and it often requires great personal and sometimes even national sacrifice. But peace is a worthy goal, and perpetual war should be avoided. Number 3, an end to this war is not the same thing as peace. It does matter a great deal how this war ends. It matters to the Ukrainian people. It matters to the Russian people. It matters to people all around the world. And so the terms of the end of the war are perhaps the greatest factor in determining whether or not Vladimir Putin will again invade elsewhere. And so the end of the war is not the same thing as peace. Now, I'll say it again. I think probably every one of us, myself included, we cringe at some portion of the above. But I really invite you to go back to the pages of the newsletter, theequippednewsletter.com. Read the passages supporting those factual assertions. Consider whether or not they are accurate, whether or not they are objective or subjective, and then consider what your role is in praying for the Ukrainian people, for praying for the Russian people, and ultimately praying for a peace that will be a true peace and that will last. As you do it, just one final reminder, remember that we are a people that are called to be committed to seeking justice and defending the oppressed, Isaiah 1:17. And those components are far more important for you and for me than any other political narrative that you and I might be naturally inclined to do. This is difficult, my friends, but we can do it, and this is why we come together, to grapple with these issues across differences, to look through a biblical lens, and to choose a perspective that stands on truth and beauty. Hi, Faith Radio family. Thann Bennett here with a special invitation for you. So much in our world today is screaming for us to be consumed by fear and division and brokenness. But the promise of the gospel means that our foundation is secure. We should live not from a place of fear, but instead our lives should be marked with power and with love and with sound minds. And so every week I'm sending out the Equipped newsletter. Every issue opens with truth from God's Word. From that vantage point of truth, we look at a handful of current events in our world. We do it not to simply consume information, but we do it looking for opportunities for the gospel of Jesus Christ to inject love and healing and redemption into those who need it. We close every issue with a simple reminder of something that is beautiful in our world. I want to invite you to join our community. You can sign up at theequippednewsletter.com. That'll trigger an email back to you. Just click to confirm. Again, it's theequippednewsletter.com. I'll see you there. Tariffs are now in effect, and by the way, this is one of those stories, my friends, that is going to change rapidly and continually. In fact, if you are listening to the sound of my voice via podcast, it's very likely that some of these terms have already shifted. I think there's going to be constant negotiation between the countries involved on these tariffs. I think you'll see them go up and down, be put on, be taken off, sometimes in a matter of hours or even days. And so this is a story that's going to continue to move very, very quickly. But U.S. tariffs on goods from Canada and Mexico are now in effect, and the previous tariffs that the United States had levied on China have been doubled. All three countries announced a retaliatory tariffs on the United States. Mexico's were a little bit later to take effect, but there has been an escalation in both directions. And during the State of the Union address, or actually the joint session address to Congress by President Trump, which we will talk about in just a moment, he announced that he would be doing reciprocal tariffs. So if a country levies tariffs on the United States would levy the same tariff in return. Obviously, opinions on this are very divided in Washington, D.C. It is not universal, but most Republicans are saying that it is a move that is long overdue, and most Democrats are saying that that it is a move that is dangerous and will increase prices on consumers. By the way, I think this response is less divided on partisan lines than many. There are certainly a number of Republicans that are not in favor of tariff as a tool for this purpose, and there are probably some Democrats that go the other way as well. So it's not quite as much of a partisan divide as many other issues, but generally speaking, that would be where the majority would land. Look, as we think about how we as Jesus followers, we as the Equipped community should interact with this story, we have limited ability to impact decisions about tariffs. This is an executive branch function, and yes, the executive branch is responsive to the people in a democratic republic, but in the short term, you have limited ability to impact this decision. However, you do have a responsibility to wisely steward what has been entrusted to you, even if things like tariffs increase that complexity if prices rise. You also have a mandate from Scripture to diligently prepare for challenges that lie ahead, and there's scriptural rooting for this at theequippednewsletter.com. And I would point you specifically to Proverbs 6. This is a very blunt and maybe to the point of slightly humorous admonition for you and I to work hard and smart. I won't read the whole thing, but it starts this way. It says, "Go to the ant, you sluggard. Consider its ways and be wise. It has no commander, no overseer or ruler, yet it stores provisions in summer and gathers its food at harvest." Go to the ant, you sluggard. Not exactly subtle. Pretty to the point, pretty cutting, and to be honest, the candor makes me chuckle just a little bit. But it is a very critical and important reminder for us. Whether we're talking about economic volatility because of tariffs, whether we're concerned about prices increasing at the grocery store, or whether the concern is the national security threats that the current president says means the tariffs are necessary and that they are meant to address those threats. No matter the consideration, the future holds uncertainty. And your job and mine is to plan wisely, to steward well, and to root our security not here on earth, but in the eternal kingdom. So let's focus on those three things that we can control today. You can't necessarily impact the short-term decisions around tariffs, but you can plan wisely, you can steward well, and you can root your security in the eternal kingdom. Our final story of the week on The Equipped is a brief one. U.S. President Donald Trump addressed a joint session of Congress on Tuesday. It was not technically a State of the Union address, as he is in the first year of a non-consecutive term, and so it was a an address to a joint session of Congress. It became the longest joint session address in United States history. It was about an hour and 40 minutes. It focused on border security, economic policy, including tariffs, by the way, which we just discussed, and also prioritizing American interest. And as has become customary, most Republicans lauded the speech and most Democrats critiqued it. And so I just have a couple of simple encouragements for us as the Equipped community today, no matter what perspective you come to this story from. Number one, engage on substance. And you and I had this exact same conversation a year ago when then President Joe Biden delivered his final State of the Union address. And so most of us have a mirrored challenge this year. It's either harder to be open and objective to the current president, or it's easier to be open and objective to the current president. But let's engage on substance. Let's leave the palace intrigue aside. Let's engage on substance and in a way that is thoughtful and faithfully has an impact towards flourishing. Number two, let's remember that the places around the world, both in modern times and across the long arc of human history, the places where dissent and disagreement are not tolerated, those are the places where oppression reigns. And so dissent and disagreement can actually be healthy if we are looking to humbly refine our perspectives and come alongside others for the purpose of flourishing. Dissent and disagreement is not the enemy, but engaging them thoughtfully and faithfully is our goal. Finally, I would tell you this. A modern-day presidential address to Congress is a very difficult venue to walk these admonitions out. It just is. And that actually makes it a perfect opportunity for us as the Equipped family. And so if you chose to watch Tuesday's speech, I want to encourage you, take a moment now to specifically identify and categorize and separate what is substance and what is palace intrigue. Then set the palace intrigue aside and engage specifically on substance. As we close our time with the beautiful this week, my thoughts are on motherhood. And this season for our family has included lots of different phases of motherhood. It has included new motherhood through adoption. It has included the loss of a mother. And in fact, it's my wife, Brooke, that has experienced both of those things together, becoming a new mother through adoption and also losing her mother. We have also experienced the gift of a mother's service, a mother's love through my mom, who has been with us a fair amount of times to help us through different points of need studied over this last season. And so there are just so many different components of motherhood, all of which lend a different beauty to our life. And it brings to my mind Proverbs 31:28, which says, "Her children arise and call her blessed, her husband also, and he praises her." And so I honor my wife, Brooke, this week. I honor my mom, Melody, and I invite you. Motherhood has its highs and lows. You probably have positive and negative experiences around motherhood in your life. But I pray that this week you would know and experience the blessing of a mother's love. I'm Thann Bennett. This is The Equipped, and we will talk to you next week. Thank you for listening to this conversation from The Equipped. These conversations are available because of your support. Become a supporter now at myfaithradio.com. And please subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any episodes, and share it with friends so together we can stay informed and be equipped to serve.